Fairless Hills, Pennsylvania, a former steel town turned truckers' haven. Cheap booze and even cheaper food highlight the main drag. A stretch of road called the Lincoln Highway, better known to the locals as the Highway of Crime. After midnight, a single light burns inside a Roy Rogers restaurant on the corner of Oxford Valley Road and Route 1. Inside, assistant manager Terry Brooks is closing up for the night. The 25-year-old is engaged and hoping to make extra money for her summer wedding. Sometime after midnight, Brooks begins her final task, a letter to the general manager, Joe Hampton. The note is never finished. The next morning, Hampton arrives to find Brooks' car still parked outside. Inside, he finds Terry lying on the kitchen floor.
About 12 feet in front of me on the floor was Terry's body, face up. There was a plastic bag over her head, a large kitchen knife sticking out of her neck. Her eyes were open, and there was blood, obviously a puddle of blood behind her head on the floor.
2 hours later, forensic technician John Durante assesses the crime scene. Durante collects the plastic bag that had been placed over the victim's head, strands of hair found on the victim's body, and the knife. He tags all 3 items and sends them out for forensic testing. A few feet from Brooks' body, Durante notes the restaurant's safe, open and empty. Within weeks, forensics returns test results on the items of evidence found at the crime scene. The reports offer no new leads as to who might have killed Terry Brooks. Over time, the case begins to fade away. The robberies stop, and a $5,000 reward for information goes unclaimed. 5 months shy of her wedding day, Terry Brooks is buried wearing her engagement ring, and the investigation into her murder goes cold. "14 years after Terry Brooks' body was found, the city of Falls Township, as well as its police department, has grown. In January of that year, Detective Sergeant Wynn Cloud begins to work through a stack of cases, all of them cold.
I started taking a look at some of the old cases we had unsolved, and the Brooks homicide was the first case that I looked at. And then I started looking at what we had as far as evidence, and we had quite a bit.
In the summer of 1998, Cloud assigns the Brooks case to a young homicide detective. His name is Nelson Whitney.
We took the 80-something pieces of evidence that we had from the crime scene in '84 to a crime lab. We utilized a criminalist by the name of Diane Marshall.
Marshall focuses her attention on items collected during autopsy. Of special interest, fingernail clippings taken from the victim.
Typically, during an autopsy, the medical examiner or coroner will do fingernail clippings because most homicides are very violent, and there's a possibility that during the struggle to preserve your life, one might scratch somebody to fend off the attacker.
Marshall plays the long shot and is rewarded. Under one of the victim's fingernails, she discovers something that looks like skin.
On the 9th fingernail, there's a little clump of something underneath the fingernail, so I wasn't sure what it was. I said, well, I'm going to take that separately, and I did.
Marshall identifies the material as human tissue. Then she breaks it down further and isolates an unknown male DNA profile. The criminalist next tries her luck with a strand of human hair plucked off Terry's clothes. Marshall is able to extract a second DNA profile from the strands of hair. The profile is identical to the unknown profile found under the victim's fingernails. Finally, Marshall examines the knife used to kill Brooks. She ignores the blade covered in the victim's blood and focuses on the handle, theorizing that the killer might have cut his own hand while holding the handle and stabbing his victim. Inside the knife's handle, Marshall finds the same unknown genetic profile found under the victim's fingernails and from hair found on the victim's body.
That was very exciting for us. That was one of those moments where momentum started to build in the case. Now we have 3 key pieces of evidence that were the same unknown subject DNA profile.
Cold case detectives have no doubt Find the owner of this genetic signature, and they will have found their killer. Lori Markle is the Chief Deputy DA for Bucks County.
There had been a significant amount of investigation related to the theory that this was a robbery homicide, but it did strike me when I began looking at the case that no one had investigated the possibility that Terry was killed by someone who might have had a motive to kill her other than simply wanting the money in the restaurant, and I felt that that possibility had to be pursued.
Inside the original homicide file, Markle and Detective Nelson Whitney discover a forgotten report. Developed by a behavioral science firm, the report offers an alternative theory for the Brooks slaying, as well as the name of a potential suspect. On the outskirts of Washington, D.C., resides a company known simply as the Academy Group. Founded by former Secret Service and FBI profilers Ken Baker and Roger Depew, the Academy Group consists mainly of retired behavioral scientists. In 1990, the group profiled Terry Brooks's killer for a private civil suit. Their conclusion? The murder itself was an intensely personal one.
The dominant things were the injuries to the victim and the stages of overkill.
Terry Brooks had been beaten, strangled, suffocated, and stabbed in the throat. So vicious was the attack that Brooks was nearly decapitated, and the knife itself became embedded in the victim's spine. In 1990, the Academy Group's conclusions led them to interview those closest to Terry Brooks. Included on that list, her fiancé, Scott Keefe.
And his response to our reasons or our desire to talk to him, as I recall, he said, "I don't care to get involved."
Keefe's behavior piqued the curiosity of Depew and Baker, who began to key in on body language.
He was twisting on the rail of the stairs. He was wanting to go, he was trying to walk up the stairs with each question that we asked, and he was highly resistant to provide answers.
And the answers Keefe did provide appeared to be lies.
Said she was left-handed when she was right-handed. Said that she didn't smoke, when in fact, at the crime scene there was a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, and everybody else knew that she smoked.
Taking their cue from the Academy Group, cold case detectives dig into Scott Keefe's past, with particular emphasis on his relationship to Terry Brooks.
They had an odd relationship. Everybody that described them as a couple said that they were a mismatch.
Some people indicated to us that they believed that Keefe may have been physically abusive toward Terry, certainly that he was verbally abusive toward her at times, and witnesses indicated to us that they believed Terry was planning to end the relationship.
Detectives don't have enough probable cause to demand a DNA sample from Keefe. Criminalist Diane Marshall suggests an alternative strategy for obtaining a sample. At 9:30 in the morning, a garbage truck rolls down Horseshoe Lane and stops in front of the home of Scott Keefe. 10 yards away, Detective Nelson Whitney watches.
I watched the trash collectors collect the trash from in front of the Keefe residence. We then went around the block and transferred the trash from the back of the trash truck into the back of this pickup truck, and then drove directly to the lab.
And we had a lot of cigarettes in this case.
42 cigarettes to be exact, over 20 bearing the brand name Newport, Scott Keefe's smoke of choice.
The DNA type that I isolated from the Newport matched the DNA from the underneath the one fingernail, from the knife, and from the hair.
And that was like Christmas.
6 hours after he first sits down with Nelson Whitney, Scott Keefe writes out a full confession to a murder and a memory he has lived with for 15 years. Keefe writes, "I went to the restaurant to pick her up. She told me she didn't want to be around me anymore and she hated my guts. I turned around and she was holding a kitchen knife. I went toward her and she swung the knife. I grabbed the knife and she came after me. That's all I remember until I got in the car. I didn't want to hurt her. I loved her, but that's what happens." On February 4th, 1984, Scott Keefe took the life of the one person he promised to love and protect. 15 years later, cold case detectives fulfill a promise of their own as Keefe pleads guilty to murdering his fiancée, Terry Brooks, and is sentenced to life in prison.